Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, and I guess I'm just going to get right down to it. My colleague, my buddy by my side, Brian E. Roach, probably has some different opinions and may have his own solo video coming out about the Steelers' overtime tie with the winless Detroit Lions, 16-all. And man, folks, I got to kick off this show just by saying pretty much everything myself and Brian said in the pregame preview for this game went out the window Saturday night when we got the breaking news that Mason Rudolph would start as the Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback. Although we didn't actually have that news, the more pertinent news was that Ben Roethlisberger was that tested positive for COVID and went on to that list, which meant he was not going to play on Sunday. So there were a lot of people that were speculating. I had people ask me even on Twitter, dropping into my DMs, do I think that Dwayne Haskins is going to play? And I said, no, people still haven't been paying attention from the preseason. Mason Rudolph is the backup quarterback, and just by virtue of what had happened, and we had spoke about this in the pregame, Ben didn't practice twice last week, which, you know, usually he has his, typically on Wednesday, his day off, his veteran privilege there. He shows up with, I believe, a shoulder was added, he's had a pec, he's had a hip, a knee, a foot, elbow connected to whatever bone. Everything's showing up on the injury report for Ben. Ben getting some rest, provided we hope he's in good health. We've seen more often than not that be the case, but you never know how this affects different people. So we do wish him to get well soon and hopefully see him on the field, perhaps even on Sunday. I guess it's all going to have to depend on how the testing and everything turns out. And as far as, I don't like to get into all these things, like the Aaron Rodgers deal was different because he's not a vaccinated player versus a vaccinated player, but it should go a little bit differently for Ben. But not to get into all of that, this turned into different turmoil when it came to Sunday. Mason Rudolph, I'm sitting having an adult beverage at a craft brewery in the Pittsburgh area, and I'm just sitting there and my phone blows up and I'm like, oh dear goodness. And I wasn't overly concerned. Some other people, I saw some ridiculous things out there, including go out and get Marcus Mariota, because, you know, at 8 o'clock at night, you could fly him over from Las Vegas when there's not a trade. The trade deadline is already gone too. And you're going to get him up to speed with your playbook and everything like that. I mean, people still haven't learned from signing Michael Vick a few years ago, where he wasn't able to get ingrained with a full training camp with the playbook. Couldn't even get on the same page with one of the greatest wide receivers to play in the last 10 years, in Antonio Brown. And speaking of, there was some crazy stuff with wide receivers in this game as well. But I see a lot of folks that are out here. There's a lot of blame and a lot of venom. I think they went into the game already hating Mason Rudolph, and I felt, and I know Brian hasn't felt the same way. He feels he's an adequate backup. He's probably not the guy to step in and be the future for Ben Roethlisberger. I don't think anybody's going to be the next Ben Roethlisberger. The reason Ben Roethlisberger is playing at age 39 is that there aren't X amount of starting quarterbacks all around the NFL. I don't want to beat this dead horse more than we do this show. I swear this topic comes up once a month almost, and especially more so when we're in the off season. But you take a look at what Mike White did after just having like some of his stuff sent to Canton to be on display with the Jets. He's in there for Zach Wilson, who hasn't been so hot as like one of the top 3 quarterbacks picked in this draft. Top first overall or whatever pick isn't necessarily doing you any good either. Joe Burrow, like, completely, you know what, the bed against the Browns just a week earlier. These things happen, and you're going to have some mediocre play, and there's a lot of mediocre quarterback play in the NFL. However, I feel that Mason Rudolph was put in a tough position and did a lot better than White with the Jets, who threw 4 interceptions. Or you have the combo over in Cleveland with Case Keenum, Baker Mayfield gets hurt, and in that game, I don't think they threw for 154 yards combined in a loss. They only completed 19 passes, and you're talking about, Jarvis Landry and Austin Hooper, and they got some dudes, right? The Arizona Cardinals, who've been on a tear and a top team in the NFC, they have to roll with Colt McCoy and Chris Streveler, and they only complete 17 passes. They don't get any scores in that game. And then you look at the opposition, the Detroit Lions. They had a concerted effort from their coaching staff that pretty much was Dan Campbell saying, we're not putting the ball in Jared Goff's hands whatsoever to determine this game for the most part. And Jared Goff did not have a very strong game. He was actually worse rating-wise than Mason Rudolph, and that's because he didn't throw a touchdown or an interception. 14 of 25 for 114 yards. 67.8 was the rating there. Well, Rudolph, this is going to be number one when it comes to the problems I had with this game. And I don't know, being overtime and 87 plays, I don't know that I'm going to go through this the same way that I always do with each post game. But 30 of 50, that's the bigger problem with the Mason Rudolph deal. You have a backup quarterback stepping in. They said that Mike Tomlin claims the game plan didn't change. I find that a little bit hard to believe. You have to tweak something here because Mason Rudolph is not Ben Roethlisberger or vice versa. I joked, I get a little sarcastic on Twitter. I've done it with Aaron Rodgers, maybe coming to Pittsburgh. I've done the same on this show with Mason Rudolph too, but I don't have the hate because I feel the coaches do prepare them. Everybody's going to blame coaching on this. Coaching doesn't, we didn't talk enough about, I guess, the rain and how that could affect sloppy conditions can affect where it levels the playing field for some teams. But this Steelers offense was already struggling. We already alluded to, could they get to 30 finally, 30 points in a game this season against this struggling Detroit Lions defense? If Ben Roethlisberger plays, perhaps. With these conditions, I'm not sure. And a lot of the same circumstances that I'm going to go through. But asking your backup quarterback to throw 50 times in a game is probably not a winning formula. They did get the ball to Najee Harris 26 times, and he did top 100 yards, 105, averaging 4 per carry. And I'm going to get into that too, because I think they should have leaned on Najee a little bit more, and they actually did, and there's some forgotten plays in this game, along with some terrible officiating. I really don't want to get into some of it, but we all know that there were some just awful, either missed or just blown calls in this game, including a running into the punter call. There's a few. I didn't get to see the replay since I was there in the stadium getting rained on, frozen and chilled to the bone, even though I was prepared for the weather. You can never really prepare for the weather. I'm not sure what it looked like on TV because it was kind of tough to see this mist. And I mean, my gloves, my terrible towel were soaked. I could actually wrench it and get water out of it, like if you had gone to the beach. So just to give you kind of an idea of the sloppy conditions and the reason there were some ball security issues, Mike Tomlin once again brings up a great point that I will hear too. Both teams had to play under the same conditions. That is absolutely true. And it's unfortunate that what happened in overtime shouldn't even, I think, got to overtime. But then again, it may have not gotten there on count of the backup kicker. We mentioned this in the pregame. One of the few things, aside from our 100 yards from Najee Harris prediction, that came through was Ryan Santoro, or Santoso. How do you say his name? Let me see here. Santoso, not Santoro. Santoso, he misses, let me see. He missed an extra point. And he also missed a field goal. I'm not sure. They got the stats here, I think, off just a little bit. Because they're saying Chris Boswell didn't make 3. Man, these stats are messed up on this page. I'm on one of the official NFL media sites, too, so I apologize. But the Mason Rudolph factor, I thought he was going to give you enough that if this did finish on Chris Boswell's foot, it wouldn't be the type of game where I thought the Steelers could win by 2 scores. You know, we're talking about over and unders and odds and parlays and stuff like that. No, that kind of goes out the window when you toss a guy into the fire like this. Now, I know this isn't his first rodeo, so to speak, but the guy hasn't played all season. We're in what? Week 10 already. And he hasn't played in any NFL action other than some preseason games. And this is like usually the case. At least you get him warmed up and ready to go like it's, walkthroughs before the game on Sunday and stuff like that. At least you have that, and you're not just throwing them out there in the second quarter or something crazy, or even the third quarter. I thought about this against the Bears. I'm like, you see these guys, they're just cold on the sidelines. And speaking of sidelines, Josh Dobbs, you see him over there sometimes, injured reserve, can't come back, ineligible to play the rest of the season. Don't want to hear any more about that either. The Dwayne Haskins factor, I heard something ridiculous, and I know where some of you are getting your opinions from. I see it in the comments. I see it all over social media. There are a few Pittsburgh sports personalities that I wanted to just strangle listening through the speaker, whether it was on my Echo thing or through the radio on my car ride home. They just absolutely just get it completely wrong. And I understand where some of these opinions are coming from, particularly like Devin Bush being a bust. It was not a strong game for the Steelers defense. This was one of the big things where you can't place the blame on Mason Rudolph solely. Did Mason Rudolph maybe miss some throws? Yes. Does Big Ben miss some throws? Absolutely, yes. If Ben plays in this game, is it absolutely a win, given all the conditions and what the defense did and the turnovers that happened in this game? I don't think it is. I don't think enough emphasis has been placed on what happens with special teams in this game either. So let's go through some of these bullet points, and then I'm going to try and pick out some key plays here in this game too. But obviously, one of the big things is 114 yards of rushing by halftime. The inside linebackers, both Bush and Schobert, I don't know what they were doing. Brian pointed this out in the pregame. He talked about gap integrity. I don't know. That pretty much Jared Goff is not attempting to throw the ball. How many attempts did he have in this game? Like, hardly any. 25, I'm going to assume. I wish I had some snapshots in time here. I might be able to get some halftime stats. I don't think he had very many attempts. Let's see. First half summary. Jared Goff attempted 7 passes in the first half. He was relied on to throw a little bit more as this game got a little tighter, and the Lions are trying to win. I'm surprised they weren't more desperate, but the wet and cold conditions, I think, had a lot to do with Dan Campbell not being more aggressive. He thought he could just hang in here, and maybe we could outlast the Steelers. The Steelers weren't outlasting anyone. T.J. Watt leaves the field. It doesn't come back. Joe Hayden leaves early in the game. I'm going to give some props to James Pierre, who I've dragged a few times on this program. I thought he played an excellent game, as did Cam Sutton, who nearly had a nice pick towards the end as well. And, excuse me, losing Joe Hayden, losing T.J. Watt, already down Tyson Alualu and Stephon Tuitt from Tuitt the whole year. I don't know what's going on with him. Alualu. I think that's some of the run game woes as well. You picked up Taco Charlton 2-3 weeks ago, and he's out there getting some significant reps. You've got, who else? Derek Tuska, who's getting significant time on the field too. I'm going to pull up some of this. I got to give Alex Highsmith some props here. I thought he played excellent. When TJ came off, he really, really rose to the occasion. And another guy almost put his jersey on. I just didn't feel like being too, overbearing here and warm. Terrell Edmunds, holy cow. And not just because of the sack. He had a couple of grown-ass man plays, snuffed out a screen. They were playing him in a position that I hadn't really seen all year long. And I think it was because maybe they felt that the Lions were going to be run-heavy versus pass-heavy, right? The same thing, we saw Miles Killebrew out there quite a bit, but I think that was also kind of because of Joe Hayden. Justin Lane got some snaps. He got beat really bad. I think it was another screen, or was it just like a halfback sweep? It was just he couldn't get off a block to save his life. It was even worse than what we were seeing with maybe Schobert or Bush throughout the game. And particularly, they cleaned it up a little bit later on. But the missed tackles, Minka Fitzpatrick, even TJ missing one, just unacceptable at this level of play. It's going to happen here or there. I told everybody that DeAndre Swift, very much like Najee Harris, you got to watch, but it wasn't DeAndre Swift that even beat them for these big scores. 28-yard touchdown run was by Jefferson. The 42 was by, and I'm going to butcher his name, unfortunately. How do we say this? Egwubuike, I believe. Egwubuike, maybe. Godwin. Number 35 just breaks free for a 42-yard run, just gashed. And this was right after special teams gave up a big kick return. You had a 48-yard punt return that had to be stopped by Presley Harvin. You had a 38-yard kickoff return that started the second half. you had some other things that ended up happening in this game. There was a holding penalty on Dan Moore. I couldn't really tell from the replay in the stadium if that was legit or not. It looked a little ticky-tack that negated a Najee Harris touchdown that would have been all the points the Steelers would have needed to just secure a victory in this game. And that's one, I think, that went so far down the list of comedy of errors in 87 plays on offense that we forgot that happened in this game. And then they weren't able to punch it in again, of course. There was the other set of plays that ends up happening in the red zone, and I put a partial asterisk as to whether or not you want to blame backup quarterback Mason Rudolph on 3 consecutive pass plays. Did he have the option to run? Did he see a look that maybe in his mind, maybe this is about the only spot where I say maybe Ben, this is different and could be a victory. Now, Mason didn't get sacked in this game at all. 87 plays, did not get sacked. Everyone's like screaming he's not a mobile quarterback. He got out there and ran for more yards than Ben has run all season, maybe the last 2 or 3 seasons, to be completely honest. Mason ends up running the ball 4 times, 36 yards. Defender tries to stick him on the end of one of those, and it was almost like it didn't faze this guy. He was like completely unfazed and just trucks him. I couldn't help but laugh at that because this is one of the more – he doesn't look athletic. We make fun of Mac Jones. He's Mason Rudolph in the same category. And by the way, so is Dwayne Haskins. Let's bring this up right now. These 3 pass plays in the red zone. One of the media, Pittsburgh local sports radio, just this morning, talking about if Dwayne Haskins is in there, you have a better opportunity to score from 5 yards out. I don't believe that for a minute. And he specifically says with his feet. We got to get away from the thought that Dwayne Haskins is a mobile quarterback. He had the worst 40 time of every quarterback tested in his draft class at the NFL Combine. He is not fast. And some people are like, well, maybe that's an injury, whatever. At Ohio State, he's a pocket passer. So much so, they had this Big Ten championship game a few years ago against Wisconsin where I was screaming to bring Haskins in because JT Barrett was driving me insane that he couldn't complete a pass because he's more of the mobile option style quarterback that program had used with Urban Meyer over all the years, right? This and Jim Tressel before that too, and I know some of you aren't Ohio State people, but just to give you my perspective because I am, that's who Dwayne Haskins is. He's a guy that sits in the pocket as well. He's going to give you the same slow, awkward, not as athletic looking runs as Mason Rudolph. He is not Lamar Jackson. He is not Deshaun Watson's not playing, but he's another guy that's in that category. So you've got some of these other quarterbacks. You got the hybrid kind of model quarterback that's out there. Justin Fields, for example, that you saw last week against the Bears. That's not who Dwayne Haskins is. Dwayne Haskins doesn't give you any more opportunities, especially with his feet in that situation. You may not even get down to have an opportunity to get 3 shots from 5 yards out of the goal line if Dwayne Haskins is in that game because I don't feel at this moment that he's better at reading defenses. We saw the final preseason game, and I'm not rooting against the guy. I think he has all the tools in his kit. Let's be real here too. I don't believe necessarily that Rudolph or Haskins is the future. They're not going to be Hall of Fame quarterbacks. They're not going to be all pros. They're not going to be Pro Bowl guys either. Can they be game managers that can make do with some of the pieces the Steelers are already putting in place for the future, such as Najee Harris, such as Pat Freiermuth? This defense led by TJ Watt. Absolutely. I believe there's a lot of teams that are in that category. I could see Mason or Haskins being Ryan Tannehill, for example. That's not much to ask. I'm not thinking that they're going to be Ben Roethlisberger. So I just want to put the brakes on that. But I think both of these guys deserve a chance to be developed and get their opportunities as they may come. I don't think that Mason necessarily tanked this team. There was a fumble. Specifically, you get down to Detroit's 33-yard line in overtime. And there's was it overtime yet? I'm going to go back and look at the game logs. But you know the play is James Washington, offensive pass interference, backed him up. Luckily, there was a nice little dump-off play to one of these guys that are going to make things happen, and that's Najee Harris. And he gains enough yards to put Chris Boswell in a position to kick field goal. Yeah, it was fourth quarter then. And tie the game 16-all. Which it should have never been behind or in any position to lose to begin with. It was disgusting, just to me, going into halftime being down 10, or being tied 10-10. It's just like, what is going wrong? The defense, it's not the offense didn't even like leave the defense out to dry. The offense had the time of possession completely bottled up in this game, even before you get to halftime. When you take a look at the total team stats, the Steelers had possessed the ball 36-48 to 33-12, but a good chunk of these extra 3-4 minutes came from the Lions in overtime. The Steelers had already had over 30 minutes of possession before the game had even completed. The Steelers also had 22 first downs, which was dwarfing the Lions up to a certain point as well. The Lions end up with 17. Lions' third down efficiency, they were 4 of 18. They converted both of their fourth down plays. Do you go for it? 4th and 2, okay? This is right after the Najee Harris touchdown that was brought back for Dan Moore with the holding penalty. They get down to the 2-yard line. Do you go for it there? Everybody here with me, you got to take the points. You don't know that you might not get close enough again. You got to feel that the Steelers defense could put a clamp on them and have Detroit in a less than favorable position backed up in their goal into their end zone if you don't make it on 4th down. But if you don't have those points on the board, and let's say it doesn't work out your way there, and you don't get any points on the board again, you're looking at a loss instead of a tie, even though this tie feels like a loss with all of the other conditions that I've mentioned. Let's see. What else do I got to pull up here? The fumble, the 39-yard pass to Deontay Johnson in overtime. And that gets you into field goal range of Chris Boswell, kicking into the close end of the stadium, even with the conditions, already making the 51-yarder earlier in the game. So this is where I have some problems with some of the sports media in Pittsburgh, too. It's going to come in a later play here. But there's a holding penalty on Devin Bush, on T.J. Hawkinson here in overtime, which negates a Minkah Fitzpatrick interception. That's another mistake. Is Minkah in position to make that if he doesn't hold? Perhaps. Was it a weak hold? I don't think so. Even with my recollection of seeing it on the replay, it looked like that was a pretty legit penalty. You can't snap the ball over the quarterback's head. This is going back to wild card against the Cleveland Browns with Marquise Pouncey. This is the same exact crap. I didn't see anybody blaming Ben then. You should not blame Mason Rudolph now for that. You got to feel lucky that Najee dives on the grenade and then nearly gets killed by one of the defensive linemen from the Detroit Lions that just lays on top of him. I was worried about health and protecting the football. You lose both offensive guards in this game. You have Joe Haig, who is versatile but primarily plays tackle, slide in as a guard for Trey Turner. Kevin Dotson limps off. He stayed in. I believe this was on that series that I just mentioned, the second drive that negated the Najee Harris touchdown run. And Kevin Dotson limps around, and they're ready to no huddle, and he just lines up, mans up, goes out there, and they run another play. Then he has to come off, and B.J. Finney was inactive for the game. They had Zach Banner, Joe Haig, and who am I missing? Who the heck just came in for him? Oh, J.C. Hassenauer. Ends up coming in as the first guard off the bench, but he essentially had 2 tackles. You got to see a little bit of Zach Banner come out there, too. It was nice to see the Steelers get some big packages, either with multiple tight ends, Derek Watt. I still don't think it was enough against a team that can't stop the run, and I'm not sure why they got away from it. I understand he was running into a brick wall a few times here or there, but just impose your will. I don't know if some of that had to deal with the injuries as well. You got to take some of these things into consideration, and you're going to say the coaches don't prepare the team or they don't make adjustments. That's complete hogwash. I think the team was plenty prepared, but you can only prepare for so much. Mike Tomlin could say as much as he wants about the standard is the standard, and you got starters, and then you got starter capable or starter ready players. There isn't a whole lot of that when you're already missing guys, particularly at the cornerback position where we saw Trey Norwood and Miles Killebrew. And I didn't complete my thought on Terrell Edmunds earlier either, but Terrell Edmunds was pretty much just manned up on T.J. Hawkinson the entire game. He played deep a couple of times, but it was mostly Minkah that was back there, and they kind of used Edmunds as solely almost like a dime backer, and I think they found something here, to be completely honest with you. If you could leave Hayden and you could leave Sutton on the sides, Maybe Trey Norwood can kind of float back there and be that guy too, or Miles Killebrew, who's been a hybrid safety linebacker during his time in the NFL, most of it with the Detroit Lions, ironically. They may have found something here, and I'm not sure if they were tinkering due to injury, desperation. Desperate times call for desperate measures, but I think they may have found something there with Edmonds. And calling that blitz, nobody was seeing that coming, because how often Steelers aren't sending a whole lot of blitzes. They did in this game as necessary, but as mentioned, it was a lot of 3-4 or the hybrid nickel type with both inside linebackers in there to prevent DeAndre Swift from running, and they still didn't do that, as the Detroit Lions finished the game with, 306 total yards, but it was all primarily all rushing here. 229 run plays, and 229 yards, 39 run plays, averaging 5.9, and that was because of those like really big plays, but still there were some chunks there. You're like, this isn't the Steelers football I'm used to watching. What the heck is going on here? So some more that ends up happening. That snap that went over his head, they lose 19 yards, and that play in overtime, that series is dead in the water from that point. Nothing you're going to do. There's a holding call on Ulysses Gilbert during the punt return here, when the Steelers get the ball back, and some real grown-ass man play. Brian's not here. I usually save it for him. I cannot forget Cam Hayward really, really stepping it up, even in overtime. There are people that are actually mentioning him in national media now as potential defensive player of the year. It's whispers, because there's a lot of names, bigger names, that are going to overshadow him, and he doesn't have the gaudy stats. But holy crap, was Cam Hayward a force here. The Steelers get the ball back, but Gilbert commits a penalty, and they lose 10 more yards on this punt return. This is the series that ends with Pat Freiermuth fumbling. This is the one I have a problem with the sports media. And unfortunately, it is the Pittsburgh Steelers post-game show, and I couldn't quite figure out how I'm supposed to agree with the take that Stan Savran wouldn't get off of. There are actually two takes. He won't actually call Devin Bush a bust, but he has pretty much intimated that to anyone who is listening. Now, Devin Bush is still coming off of an injury. Charlie Batch kind of backed him up a little bit, kind of went to bat for him and said, hopefully this is where you're turning the corner. It's like about a year later. Did he come back too soon? Has he not played enough? I mean, you got to remember, he was only in his 5 games into his second year as a pro, and he wasn't a full-time starter until last year. He was still kind of rotating in and out as a rookie. So, this is almost, I feel like we're in that Bud Dupree conversation of we're labeling this a little too early. It was not a pretty game for either of those guys. Could not get off blocks, et cetera, et cetera. Also, the penalties don't help as well. But I understand now where all of you are getting some of that from. And to bring him up in this game, it was merited when you give up 229 yards against the run. But he's far from the only problem on this team, especially when there's 6 broken tackles from Igubuke. Apologies, spelling with the question mark if I'm doing this in a chat, right? So let's see where we're at here. I'm looking for overtime, and I'm looking for, obviously, this is the drive with Pat Freiermuth, who had been largely almost ignored during this game. It was really odd to see him have like 2 passes go his way that he didn't come down with. I understand some people were frustrated in looking maybe Mason overthrows, underthrows. Oh, I'm jumping around way too much. I got on the Dwayne Haskins train. The 3 pass plays. Ray McLeod, who I was calling Antonio McLeod because he almost broke one of the returns. He was largely involved in this and one of the favorite targets of Mason Rudolph for whatever reason. 12 targets. Only Deontay Johnson targeted more. 9 catches for 63 yards. Led in receptions, but Deontay Johnson led in yards with 83 off the big play. With the fumble where he's trying to make more happen and the sloppy conditions, loses the football. That was enough to end the game right there. That is disappointing enough as it is. That happens. It happened to Juju against the Baltimore Ravens last year. The third down play where Ray McLeod, there wasn't a DB over on him. And I had to think that Mason Rudolph saw that, and they kind of went to shift a little bit, the Detroit Lions defense, and they missed covering him. And the ball skips short. And so you have some of these balls that go high. It's what made me think of it and come back, because Freiermuth has one that kind of goes up through his hands. Deontay Johnson did as well. I thought Deontay may have jumped early. Freiermuth not coming down with that was a little odd. I think Mason was playing it safe a little bit too. He's thinking about not turning the ball over. You had the miscommunication early in the game. Kalen Ballage drops an easy one that's thrown to him right in the breadbasket, and then Mason comes right back to him on the very next play. And it looks like the plays are the first one wasn't designed for Ballage, but the second one definitely is. And there's a miscommunication there that leads to that interception. Well, this is in your head. This is all things that are that go into you playing the game. And I just don't think he had the same feel for how open or what Ray was doing as far as his route being run, and he just had to lob it right in there. There was another play with Deontay Johnson on a quick slant, very similar to two that we've seen in recent games, where he could take it almost to the house, and it was a missed opportunity just out of the reach of Deontay Johnson too. And I think that's the thing is that Mason is putting some of these balls where the defenders can't get to him, but then again, some of his players can't. So that's kind of my take on this. You get this final drive, almost final drive here in overtime, at least the Steelers' final drive. They have 1 minute and 37 seconds left from their 11. And you got the Detroit Lions who call a couple of timeouts because they feel if they could get a stop here, they might still have a chance to get the ball back, get in a field goal range again. This is after the missed field goal by the backup kicker, which gives the Steelers still some life. And neither team feels like they want to win this game, but I feel like the Steelers had this in the bag twice. First, where Deontay ends up with the long pass and fumbles it, and that was a dime by Rudolph. The one that Stan was getting all over on is that you have 15 seconds remaining in the game. They had just picked up enough yards to get down to Detroit's 39 after Mason completes a pass to Deontay Johnson, and he runs out of bounds after 10 yards. From the 39, you're probably looking at a 58-yard field goal, and the longest field goal in history at Heinz Field. Record is held by Chris Boswell. Beat his own. I think he was tied with one of the former Cowboys kickers for a 55-yarder. This was they hit a 56-yarder at one point. This would have been 58 or 59. And you might attempt this for the win, and then people are going to be really down on themselves. And I think that was kind of the thought process here. Excuse me. Of trying to get Boswell just inch him a little more forward. Now, the Steelers are out of timeouts. They just used the timeout a few plays earlier on a 3rd and 1 from their 44. 2 plays later, Deontay Johnson goes out. 15 seconds left in the game. He finds Pat Freiermuth for what ends up being only a 1-yard gain. And he wasn't quite all the way to the sideline. And the questioning was, why run this play or just throw it away and take your chances with the 58-yarder that no one has done in the history of that stadium? Do I think Boswell, in this situation, you're going to probably try it. And I was kind of surprised they didn't bring the field goal unit out to do it right then and there. But Tomlin's thinking, could we have not gotten maybe about 2-3 more yards, a little bit closer? The elements. There was a lot of wind, and if you've ever been at Heinz Field, out on the field, and I know it's not like something that a lot of people get to do in this day and age of what we're dealing with COVID and whatnot, but having been down there and seen warm-ups several times, especially when it's inclement weather day. One of the last ones I was down there was that Dolphins game. It snowed. It was the hook and ladder thing when Antonio Brown stepped out by about an inch. And I'll never forget the way watching the punters and kickers and the specialists work, and the way the wind whips, and the way the ball just does whatever the heck it wants once it gets into a certain height. It's almost like if you're looking at the U.S. map and a weather forecast and jet streams and all the things that come together. That's exactly what you can picture it in your head looking up at the clouds there. And I'm certain that this was part of the decision-making process to run this extra play. If he doesn't get out of bounds, the sentiment is maybe it's game over. I'm not so certain, because the Lions recover this ball, this fumble. There was 8 seconds that were put on the clock. Is 8 seconds enough to go and get lined back up? If you only gain a yard here, it's not enough to really secure you a victory. So I don't know. I'm not totally all on the play calling either. The Steelers score on the first drive, to start the game. And then, the Lions were trying to say, let's see what you could do. We won the coin toss. You take the ball. You got a backup quarterback. We're putting the pressure on you. And they rose to the occasion there. There was just some really awkward stuff throughout this game, and I didn't even get on some of the officiating still, like the roughing the passer call that was absolutely miserable. There was just some stuff. There was another, I actually want to say that the James Washington pass interference one, offensive pass interference, was a total phantom call as well. But there's some things there where you're trying to overcome all of these things. You've got some penalties, warranted or not. You've got some the elements with the weather. You've got injuries. You've got a lot of backups in. It's a very long game, and you're cold and you're wet and all these other things that factor into this. I'm not certain that this play with 15 seconds left was necessarily the sharpest decision, but at the same time, do we feel that comfortable with the 58? Perhaps even 59-yard, because remember, this is from the 39. So are you going to move Presley Harvin a little closer, try and get a closer snap, all of these different things that are mechanics there, and then maybe it gets blocked, or there's a fumbled snap, and then Detroit scoops it up, and then that's how they win their first game of the year. So I'm pumping the brakes on a lot of these things. I think there's a lot of knee-jerk reaction because a lot of entitled fans really felt entitled to a victory here. I'm not going to lie. Prior to seeing that Big Ben was going to sit out of this game, I thought this should be a slam dunk. It might not be a slam dunk in the case of some of these other scores we saw from around the league, like Buffalo winning, putting up 45 on the Jets, or there was Kansas City with 41, or New England 45 points, 45-7 win over the Browns. The Steelers don't necessarily lose any ground. It wasn't comfortable seeing them struggle, but at the same time, I'm realizing that this is looking a lot more like a preseason roster in certain aspects against a pretty much a full Detroit Lions team that's just a bad football team. Had they played against a different team, I don't know that they win this game, especially with the mistakes that they made. 3 turnovers. They get none on the turnover column. You go -3. That's not exactly winning football. Having your backup quarterback pass 50 times, not necessarily winning football. So hopefully that brings some of the heat off of Mason. I thought that Mason, for the most part, the Ray McLeod pass that he skipped short, that should have been the slam dunk if we're going to talk slam dunks. The Kalen Ballage play with the miscommunication, whoever that's on, either one of them, that ball gets let loose and it gets picked off. That's not ideal. I thought he handled a lot of these bad snaps throughout the game with a lot of poise. I mean, he puts his palm right up there, his mitt, catches the thing and brings it right back down to Najee and puts it in his belly. And that also didn't help the run game when those type of things are happening too. That fraction of a second is a fraction of a second you're giving to the opponent. Let's see. He didn't get sacked, which I thought was quite amazing for a guy that's supposed to be statuesque in the pocket. I thought a positive was that opening possession scoring drive, and then, of course, the scrambling, which I didn't see coming, and I don't necessarily want to see coming from any quarterback that's not supposed to be. I don't even want to see it. I cringe that someday Lamar Jackson's going to get seriously hurt or something like that. I just feel that way. Maybe I'm old school when it comes to the hybrid quarterbacks, but that's just me. So, folks, I'm going to put a bow on this. We'll see if Brian's got some other comments, or we maybe even circle back to you with even more on all of this. Again, I know it seems like, hey, Joe, you're way too positive about this. It should have been a win. That's just an ugly football game. It was ugly phases. There was ugly from the offense. There's a lot of ugly from the defense, and there is super ugly stuff from the special teams units that could have been cleaned up and better. At least the punt game, the Presley Harvin punt, that was one that went in the end zone that you wish could have got down too. But for the most part, there weren't any shanks or anything like that. But all 3 phases of football were not clean when you're playing against any type of opponent, 0-8 or not coming in. You got to play clean football. You got to protect the football. You don't commit penalties. You don't all these different things that factor into it. I still think that Mason gave them a decent opportunity to win the game, and I still think the Steelers defense, at the end of the day, at least rose to the occasion and didn't lose the game at the tail end. It's just unfortunate. It's like, man, you can't let Detroit score much more than 16, because I'm not sure the Steelers' offense, led by Mason Rudolph, 2 backup guards, no Chase Claypool. Juju's been out for a while, but yet another starter that's not there. Najee Harris getting dinged, and you got to lean on Ballage or Benny Snell. Those aren't formulas for putting up a whole lot of points for a team that hasn't been putting up a whole lot of points all year. So don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, folks. My name, once again, is Joe, and I appreciate you tuning in here, viewing or listening wherever you are. You could also leave a review there, and we very much so appreciate you supporting Steel City Underground. Until next time, as always, I encourage everyone out there to be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.